the Irish rebel tradition, it's about everyone who's colonised. It's not just about us. Bernadette Devlin McCalliskey, she was given the key to New York in 1973, I believe it was, because she was one of the original marchers at Bloody Sunday, and she was there and she witnessed 26 people being shot by British soldiers. And then the Irish Americans, because Irish America had this fond old country thing, and Irish Americans from a safe distance, a lot of them liked to be up the rah, and they'd give money towards the cause and all of this. And Bernadette went over to see the Irish Americans in 1973, and when she got there, she met all the Irish Americans who had a few quid, who had a bit of money. And she said, she realised, Jesus, you're pretty racist over here. I know you support me back home, but the way that you're speaking about black and brown people is horrendous. So when the mayor of New York gave Bernadette the key to New York City, she took it and she went up to Harlem and gave it to the Black Panthers. And that's Bernadette going, I don't care that you're Irish American. This isn't about this. This is about colonisation, and this is about oppression and systems of oppression and anti-capitalist. And Kneecap are carrying that tradition. That's what they're doing.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you how the sausage gets made for a second. When I'm doing a downstream, what happens is that there's a Google Doc, and I fill this Google Doc with notes and questions and prompts. And basically, the reason why that happens is because I'm responsible for making sure that there's at least 60 minutes of watchable content for you. And this is the backstop, right? This is me taking responsibility for exactly that. But the dream is when you get a guest for whom you don't need the notes. You barely even need the questions, and you certainly don't need a plan, because in their bones, they are a teller of political and historical stories. And that's exactly who Blindboy is. You've probably listened to his podcast. You probably recognize him from the bag over his face. But for me, what he is somebody who is so interested in people, the history of ideas, and answering the question of why we are the way we are, that you just have to sort of set him off and watch him run. So I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. It was a real joy.
I heat shrink it to my face, you see. So because it's not, even though it's a plastic bag, right? It's not really a plastic bag. It's a plastic bag that has been repurposed into a mask. So it's a mask.
But I was also thinking like the woolly hacks. I don't know if this is true, but it's just something my mum says. My mum's like, 60% of your heat escapes through the head, like the top of the head. I don't know if it's true or if it's just a Bengali old wives' tale.
I wear the hat because I look too silly without it. But it's interesting about things escaping. I was looking through the history of the dunce cap, and it actually comes from, there was this fella called John Scotus Dunnes. He was a Scottish philosopher from, I think, like the 1400s. And he had some type of mystical Christianity. And he was shut down as a heretic. And he used to wear these pointy hats because literally he was like, I'm pointing my brainwaves up towards God.
Up to God.
But then because he was declared a heretic, the church kind of reframed him as an idiot. And that's where dunce comes from. John Duns Scotus. So can you hear this?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Where's that from?
And you're using the Zoom H6, all reliable Zoom H6.
Yeah.
They stopped making them, man.
Well, the new version does 32-bit floating recording. So
But it's made out of shit. It's like shitty plastic. You haven't had one, have you?
The new one, not the new one, no.
No, it's made with this really shitty plastic, but and 32-bit floating it does.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay, I love those. They're great, but my screen cracked. So.
Yeah, they're a workhorse.
I love them so much. It also makes me feel a little bit like I'm in Star Trek.
Yeah, it is very
like
that.
The
like that.
scanny thingy.
Very much so. With the pointy things on it.
Yeah.
Are you a sci-fi nerd?
I am a sci-fi nerd.
Okay.
I especially find Star Trek really comforting because I watched a lot of Next Generation when I was a kid, and so there's something about it which, especially if I'm feeling stressed or anxious, it can just sort of like, I don't know, make me like bed down in my own body a bit. But also, my favorite episode is one which is about language, and it's the one called Darmok, where basically he encounters an alien race who speak through memes. So it's a form of language which only makes sense if you understand the context. And it was a sort of like analysis of the meme before the meme even existed.
Have you heard the conspiracy theory that Barack Obama used to write Deep Space Nine fan fiction and the CIA?
What?
Yeah.
No.
So what I find strange about this is, so the theory, apparently Barack Obama used to write Deep Space Nine fan fiction. And then when he was like, I might become president, they had to delete it all from the internet. And I remember clearly reading about it 10 years ago. And now all mention of it has gone from the internet. But
So,
it makes sense. It's not very, I suppose Trump has changed all that, but before Trump, it wasn't very presidential for a presidential candidate to be writing Deep Space Nine fan fiction. I don't know
do
if
you think
want...
Trump writes fan fiction?
I mean, it is loads of fan fiction, isn't it? I mean, the thing, Trump's fan fiction, I think, it's the professional wrestling thing. You know, you can't detach him from professional wrestling. And like, first off, he was in WWE years ago. Personal friends with Vince McMahon. He's after Vince McMahon's ex-wife, Linda, I believe, is now the Secretary of Education in America.
She is.
Which is so strange. And then, like, there's a very interesting thing within wrestling, and it's unique to wrestling, to professional wrestling. It's called kayfabe.
Which is like fake, but doesn't quite. It's like the storytelling of the world, right? The like make believe and world building.
It's the make believe, right? But what makes it interesting in terms of theatre is there's no fourth wall. Usually with theatre, there's spectator, and then there's the show going on stage. But in order because professional wrestling is theatre, it's brilliant athletes, and it's storytelling, and it's theatre. But we know that it's fake, and we know that this guy's going to win, that guy's going to lose. They don't really hate each other. They could be best buddies backstage. We know all that. But the collective sense of suspended disbelief that we all have to engage in to enjoy it, that's unique to wrestling, and that's called kayfabe. And Trump brings a lot of that to politics. An example of it I consider would be like the use of humour. Like when you think of fascism, most of us, we have a clear idea of what fascism is. And what pops up is Hitler, Franco, Mussolini, right? And it's quite humourless. It's very straightforward and humourless.
And that's why the Charlie Chaplin Great Dictator
Exactly.
film was such a puncturing.
Exactly. Because the humourlessness of not just fascism, you actually find it also in the art world, you find it in monarchy, in the military. It's solemnity. And solemnity is, it's not being serious, it's the performance of seriousness. And anytime you introduce humour into a solemn space, solemnity falls apart and it reveals absurdity. Do you get me? The Trump administration, they're not using solemnity. So they're like deporting people to Venezuela, right? Which is possibly illegal. And they're doing that, which is clearly fascist. But then the official White House account is posting comedy videos of these people being deported, but with the sound of their change, and it's ASMR. The official account labels it ASMR. So that's asking us to engage in a kayfabe, and the kayfabe we're engaging with is, this is all a joke. You know what I mean? It's being presented as this is all a joke. They're not really bad. That's just like a heel, like a wrestler. But like, no, they are really bad because they're doing something really bad. So it's difficult then. You can't do any Charlie Chaplin on that because they're making the joke first. And the thing is, they use memes and humour quite effectively as a way to laugh at anyone who criticises it. So if you criticise that and say, what they're deporting people to Venezuela is wrong, the supporters come in with a wink wink, almost as if you don't get the joke.
You're humorless.
You're humorless. Or you see that hugely with Elon Musk. Elon Musk could say things that are horrendous. And then you go, this is a horrendous thing that he's saying, I disagree with this. And then the followers come in and go, you just don't get it, you don't get the joke. You know what I mean? And that's That's a type of kayfabe. That's a type of, there's a suspended disbelief that everyone's being asked to engage in order to understand the theatre of it.
But there's also this sense of unreality, which I think is a lot more pervasive. And I think this a lot when you hear people talking about the Matrix or other people as NPCs. It's the sense of, well, nothing is real and nothing matters and everything's sort of a stage for me to play something out. And impacts on people I don't really have to consider. A friend of mine who's a teacher in secondary schools said that, like, you know, students who, you know, I think would always struggle with social connection and learning emotional literacy and being able to get their heads around the idea that other people have thoughts and feelings the way that they do, now have this scaffolding of NPC that they really hang it on. And so when you're trying to do that work as a teacher, which is as well as, you know, teaching biology or physics or whatever, you're trying to help socialize children into adulthood, there is a level of resistance to it. You're trying to draw me into the Matrix, but, you know, you're trying to draw me into the illusion that all of this is real and meaningful.
I think it's easy to sell this concept of the Matrix to people, right? When the vast majority of our interaction and conversations are actually happening in the Matrix of social media. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's so much. I try and look at everything through the lens of, did this problem originate on social media? Is it playing out on social media? And the way that I frame social media sometimes is, and it doesn't matter the platform. And this has been most of the discourse, I'd say, for the past 12 years. Like, a social media platform, it's designed by a billionaire. And often it's a platform where billionaires have decided that all discourse, all conversation must take place in the form of turn and response combat. You know what I mean? Like, even pre-Elon, I used to say that Twitter was the world's largest massively multiplayer online role-playing game. It was a text-based role-playing game where you win by having the best complaint. You know what I mean? That's how Twitter used to be. Now, I don't know how to define Twitter. I don't think it even knows what it is, what X knows what it is. But, like, billionaires are deciding how we converse and where we converse and the way that we converse in a way that isn't human. Like, I spoke to a cyber psychologist about this. A thing happens when we use social media called the disinhibiting effect. And what it is it's similar to when we're in a car. Like, you know, when you're walking on the road and you almost bump into a person.
Yeah.
You have that lovely moment of empathy.
And you do the that really wonderful 1-2 step where you're like
a giggly laugh.
Yeah.
And it's actually a lovely shared moment of connection with a stranger. And I always walk away from almost bumping into a person in real life with a nice feeling in my belly of that was a healthy conflict resolution right there. And I felt like that was nice. And you walk away. Now imagine you're in a car and you almost bump into someone. Now two people are screaming and roaring.
You fucking idiot.
Yeah. Cars give us the disinhibiting effect. Like, I could be in a car on a packed street just digging into my nose, picking away. Because it's like, I'm in a car, no one can see me. It's like, you're in the middle of the fucking road. I'd never walk down the road picking my nose like that. So social media can have that disinhibiting effect on us. And that then is what can usher us into combat. I don't think I've ever seen an effective conversation take place in the Instagram comments, nor have I had a decent argument with anybody that was compassionate and listening to each other on social media. And the important thing too is the billionaires are becoming billionaires because they're earning money from the data of our behaviour. So, like, I think the word that social media companies use is high arousal emotions.
Yeah, so the emotions of outrage, disgust, judgment, fear, especially when you see the ostracism game being played out in front of you.
Anything that is actionable. So the high arousal is an emotion that makes you want to do something to that app. That could be a like, a share, a comment, or simply staying on it. And the algorithm is consistently geared towards triggering these high arousal emotions because the longer you stay there, the more you interact, the more data of ours that the social media company can use. And data is like the new oil, you know? So when it comes to anything about, it's very easy to sell the concept of a matrix. If most of our conversations are effectively happening inside a video game, then it becomes really easy. So it's about how do we move discussion off social media? It's a tough one, you know?
What about dating apps? Because on the one hand, I feel like I can see how there is a disinhibiting effect that comes from having really no shared social context whatsoever. So people treat each other in ways which are disposable, in ways which are shallow, in ways which are transactional. There's low trust, so it's a bit of a prisoner's dilemma, right? Like, I want to be the one to jump first before you can. But then there's also extreme inhibition, sort of fear of messiness or authenticity. I feel older than Methuselah when I talk to people who are on the apps, because I was talking to someone who was like, oh yeah, well, a first date is now a coffee and a walk. And I'm like, well, no wonder we're like giant pandas who can't mate, because like where's the heat in a walk? You're not even looking at each other. So I mean, how do you see that play out? Because it's not quite the same as I'm in a car, no one can see me. It's no one can see me in some ways, but also I feel so scared of scrutiny at the same time.
Again, like the dating app thing is interesting because you're talking about human connection. You know, you're talking about something that I don't think you can put a date on this. This is why we're alive. You know, sexual selection is just, that's a long time ago. We've again allowed billionaires in to create the space where that occurs. Like, I'm old enough to remember, like sometimes I view music. Often when I'm looking at humans, I go, what would an alien say if they were looking at humans? If like, what would Martian David Attenborough say? And sometimes I think, like, music is part of the human mating ritual. Like, dancing sometimes it's a vertical expression of a horizontal desire. Do you know what I mean?
It's not always that vertical as well.
No, it's not. When I was younger, in my 20s, before dating apps, before social media, you had to go to a nightclub. And like, it was strange in my day as well, because it was, when I was in my 20s, bootcut jeans were a thing. Well, now they're back now. But
we're going to talk about the bootcut jeans, because you had some words for Mr. Lamar, I believe.
For who?
Kendrick. You said that he had a piss soakers.
I can't believe bootcut jeans are coming back. I just can't believe. I'm looking at fashion that 20-year-olds are wearing now, and it looks like they're literally dressed like how I used to dress when I was 20, but when I was having a major depressive episode. You know what I mean? Because the thing is that I'd be wearing the baggy bootcut jeans, but my mental health's in shit. So I'm like, I'm going to put on my school shoes too. And they're just walking around like this. Like, you know, it's mad. And then the level of piss that's being soaked up through the bottom of the pants, it's like, we figured this out a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. And you know when it gets caught under your trainers?
Yeah.
And so you've got that like little raggy hole.
The capillary action.
Yeah.
So it drags the piss up as far as your shin. So it can be piss, side or anything. And I went into looking like, so back in Ireland in the early 2000s, because I was just trying to figure out how did bootcut jeans become a thing back then? Because it's clearly, I don't know much about fashion, but I know that's a bad idea because your pants are getting your shins wet. I think it came about in the early 2000s. You weren't allowed into a nightclub unless you had shoes and a collar.
And so I remember,
and that was here as well, wasn't it?
When Cristiano Ronaldo signed for Man United, he had bootcut jeans and he had the pointy leather shoes and the spiked up gel hair. Like it was.
And that was 2004 abouts?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I think that because nightclubs had this rule about you must wear shoes, you must wear a collar. I remember going to nightclubs and being like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to wear shoes or a collar. This is silly. So you'd hide them with these massive jeans. You know what I mean? And that's how that look came about. But I can't remember how I got onto this topic, Ash.
I can't remember. You mentioned bootcut jeans and
What were we talking about before?
We were talking about
jeans?
Mating rituals.
Yes.
And dancing. And being at the club in your 20s.
In my 20s, before dating apps or whatever, like, men had to dance. And I mean men who couldn't dance.
Oh, yeah.
So you had men in bootcut jeans. And the thing was, the music at the time, it was bump and grind hip-hop.
Oh, yeah.
Bump, and that was mainstream. So you had these men like breastfeeding a pint of Bulmers or a pint of Magners, as you call it, or breastfeeding Magners. And men are bumping and grinding to Beyonce in bootcut jeans because they had to, because that was the only way that they might possibly lock eyes with another woman and then possibly have an awkward conversation. Or maybe smoking areas were great. Because when smoking areas came in, all of a sudden it's like there's this extra space where you can go and speak, or cigarettes became an in to speak to somebody.
I have never really known how to inhale. All right, and I sound like Bill Clinton being like, I never inhaled, but like no, literally, like I remember being like in my 20s and just sort of like using the cigarette as a pretext.
Absolutely. It was a great, especially for me, like with autism is no crack when it comes to introductory conversations and small talk, but do you want a cigarette? Can I have a cigarette was a great one. The smoking area was just a different set of rules. One thing that really pissed me off recently was, did you see that TV show Say Nothing?
I haven't watched it yet.
So it's brilliant because the story it's based on is brilliant and the actors are astounding, right? But it's about the life of Dolores Price, and it's set in Belfast in the early 70s, and it's about the IRA. And the story's amazing, but they have to sex it up a little bit. So, like, no one's really dressed like they did in the 1970s.
Yeah.
There's no sideburns.
Are there any perms?
No perms and sideburns. Just everyone looks a little bit like Paul Mescal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's fine. I can get over that. I can understand it. But I tell you what fucking pissed me off. Every single episode, someone goes to a smoking area.
They would
There's
not.
no one going to
They would
smoking
not.
areas in Belfast, and they didn't exist.
You'd smoke over a crib if you had to.
And not only are smoking areas present in every episode, there's one particular episode where the IRA the high brass of the IRA are sitting in a meeting with the British cabinet, and they're negotiating. And the directors are trying to show a class difference and an uncouthness. And the way they show that the member of the IRA is uncouth is that he sparks up a cigarette indoors. And it's like, you mean like literally would have been doing in 1971? So I'm really going around the place with this stuff. Ash, I apologise.
But going back to the club for a second, so we're talking about like allowing billionaires in with dating apps, the way in which it's I think really inhibited people's ability to connect. And again, like I'm going to sound like back in my day,
I know.
the DJ wasn't as prominent a focus. People danced with each other, and now like when I go to nights, people are dancing in a sad little line, and I blame the impact of techno, quite frankly.
Go way out of that. Why is that?
I blame techno because like with techno, I think that it's a nihilistic genre, and I think especially when you compare it to the joy of like house or UK funky or something, where there's a bit more of like dancing with each other. It's like everyone dances facing the DJ. It's like sort of like dissonant and jarring, and like I don't know how you're supposed to cop off with anyone when there's techno about.
That is an interesting one because, again, back to what I said about like if I was a Martian David Attenborough and I'm looking at humanity, I would be looking at, right, here's the nightclub, this is a human mating ritual. This is why too I think that so much of listening to music happens in your 20s. Like I adore music, I love it. But one of the saddest things is that when I got to about maybe 26, the amount of friends that I could share music with just gets really smaller and smaller until now. No one my age really listens to music except a couple of proper music heads. And I think that does have something to do with human mating rituals. I think music is really tied to this. And I knew someone, he was a DJ in Dublin in the 80s, and he popularised dance music in Dublin. But in Dublin, do you know what his name was? The man who killed the slow set.
Oh.
Yeah. So now, I don't remember that slow set wasn't a thing in the early 2000s, but when I was at teenage discos. So you had teenage discos here, yeah?
Yeah, except like not really. I think for me, teenage discos were a bit different because I went to an all-girls school.
Okay.
So because we wanted boys at our prom, me and my friends had to organise our own one at the golf club. And we told them it was an 18th birthday so we could also drink.
Okay, well in Ireland it was very, very strange. So in Ireland... So I went to an all-boys school and there was the all-girls school, which meant you're socialising for the first time. But our teenage discos, like, this is the 90s, so they were controlled by the nuns.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so you're 12, 13.
Was there a ruler?
A broomstick.
A broomstick.
So what would happen is we'd get to hear most of the tunes were, we'd say, late 90s dance, finger boys, stuff like that.
Okay.
And then the slow set comes on. And when the slow set comes on, it was an amazing thing to observe. Because at a teenage disco, boys one side, girls the other.
Who did the choosing?
Well, who was brave enough to get up first? Someone had to be very brave to walk up and slow dance. And then the choosing that's an interesting one. It was your friends who had to do the choosing.
Really?
Yeah, it was. No one had the courage to walk up to a girl and say, will you kiss my friend? Or will you kiss me? It was, will you kiss my friend? Will you kiss my friend? That's how it worked. And then you'd slow dance and kiss, but then the nun came in with the stick in between. Yeah.
See, because we had the all-boys school that was next to us, and then there was also one a little bit further afield where we sort of corralled boys from. And
How would you corral the boys?
Oh, okay. Well, so one was we had a friend who went to confirmation classes, so she met a bunch of Catholic boys who got integrated into the group of friends. We were like, finally, boys.
Oh, you went to Catholic school?
I didn't, but she was Catholic, and
Okay.
she found the St. Ignatius boys and was like, right.
The St. Ignatius
St.
boys.
Ignatius
That's
boys.
not a very attractive name.
It was not. And then there was the Enfield Grammar boys who, in the morning before school, especially for those of us who would pretend to smoke, you'd sort of like perch near the graveyard and like hang out a bit and sort of create situations for either after school or the weekends where like you could gather as a bigger group. And what I remember from that time is actually the boys being really powerless, because we as the girls would, during the week, sort of plan like who was permitted to fancy whom.
Yeah.
And then sort of dole out the partnerships like during this mixed social time. And I just don't really remember the boys having a say in it. I just don't remember them being agentic in any way.
So that's when drink got involved.
Yeah.
Like in my experience, right? So if I'm thinking teenage discos, right? 13, 14, by 15, now everyone is having a naggin of vodka or a shoulder of vodka as you have it here. And when, and this...
It was Glenn's, which tasted like paint
Glenn's,
stripper.
is that what you drank? We would have Smirnoff, or here's the thing,
Smirnoff,
like...
arc it thee, fancy.
Or Huzar was the other one. The thing was, right, is this is where I think a lot of unhealthy relationships with alcohol in Ireland in particular came about, right? Because the thing is you're 14, 15 and everyone just wants to kiss a girl at the disco. And if alcohol was involved, it meant it wasn't really rejection. If someone if you even walked up to the girl you fancied yourself and she said no, then it could be like, I didn't really want it, I was drunk. Do you know what I mean? So drunkenness became an excuse for the fear and to remove the inhibition. But the thing is as well is that, Jesus, everyone was drinking spirits because they had to hide it.
Yeah.
And then people were getting their stomach pumped, you know? And I was lucky enough to have older brothers, and my older brothers would be like, just drink cans. Because if you drink cans, if you're like 16-year-olds aren't supposed to drink, but they did anyway. But if you have 2 cans of beer, you're going to get sick. It's unlikely that you're going to get your stomach pumped. But back then, people were just down in a naggin of vodka, and all of a sudden they're in hospital. You know what I mean? So
because also the time you have without your parents is so compressed, and so you everything speeds up. Like you drink really fast because you've got one, no idea how to drink, but the other is you're like, okay, well, maybe it's 3 hours until like my mum's going to give me some grief.
I mean, what we're speaking about here is dynamics of people partnering up, right? And not everything, even though we're doing a bit of a back in my day, not everything we're describing is healthy. Like the alcohol part isn't healthy. I don't think nuns in there doing that is healthy at all. But it's
See, we'd call that the halal gap.
What?
Yeah, we call that the halal gap. So
What's
it's like
the
keep the halal
halal gap?
gap.
Is that the actual word for it?
It's the space of not touching or of distance between
Did you,
boys and girls.
Did you go to an Islamic school?
No, that was just because, you know, it's a lot of people
Okay.
from Muslim backgrounds who'd be like, oh yeah, halal gap.
Like my first sex education came from a priest.
Oh.
Oh my God. He told us that if you have a wet dream, it meant you slept with the devil in your sleep. Yeah. Seriously.
What a fucked
I
up
was
thing
like,
to say.
I know. I was like 11. What the fuck did they have a priest in? That was just Catholic Ireland. That
Yeah.
was just how it was. It's nuts when I think back. Like, I mean, the thing is with Ireland is like, you know about the Magdalene Laundries.
Yes.
Like, they were running until 1996. There's people listening to this who were alive when, like, Ireland had we don't call it this, but Ireland at one point may have had the world's largest prison population of these women who were sent away because, I mean, the last Cillian Murphy film, what the fuck's it called? I interviewed him about it and all. Bollocks. The last film that Cillian Murphy was in, and it focused on the Magdalene Laundries, does a brilliant job of looking at the fear and silence that was around it. Another great film, which was from the year 2000, is called the Magdalene Sisters, I believe it's called, which is based on stories of women who were in these laundries. And like, that was there until 1996. So even when I was a kid in the 90s, I did receive a Catholic education.
But a lot of those women who had experiences in the Magdalene Laundries, or just how the existence of the laundries forced them to make certain decisions when abortion is unavailable and being an unwed mother is so stigmatized. So lots of people giving babies up for adoption where they might not have otherwise. They then later become parents in, kind of socially acceptable partnerships. Is there a sort of mental health consequence of these extremely traumatized women then raising children in a legit fashion themselves?
Like, even when I was growing up in Limerick had a massive Magdalene institution. I actually went to art college there. When it stopped being a Magdalene Laundry in 1996, it became the Limerick Art College, which I do love now because it's mostly young women making feminist art in this space that for so many years was a really brutal Magdalene institution. Like, this building, when I went there as a student, I remember speaking to the caretaker, right? And this is how fucked up it was. So you've got a church in the centre. The church is now the gallery space. It's not a church anymore, but churches are designed that if you were looking at it from above, it's a cross. So there's all these little tunnels underneath the building. And I asked the caretaker, like, what are these little tunnels? Because they were blocked off. They were tunnels so that when the women in the Magdalene Laundry are going to church on a Sunday, they're here on this side, but their kids are here. The tunnels were so that the kids could travel underneath them and that the mothers would never, ever. So they're in the same building with their kid who is 6, 7 years of age and was born inside there. And they know that every single Sunday they're going to Mass and they're looking straight ahead and they can hear their children singing over there, but they can't see them. And it was designed within the architecture so that those little kids go through tunnels. And that was happening in Ireland. And
I mean, that's a form of torture.
it's fascism. That's pure fascism. It's absolute psychological torture because someone had to... It made me think of the zone of interest.
Yeah.
Because the thing with the zone of interest is the bureaucracy. It's men standing around in rooms having a decision about how best to make this building that kills people. So someone in Ireland, a priest or a cardinal or a bishop, sat down with an architect and said, we're going to need these tunnels. You know what I mean? And they had a good think about how best to do it. So that is very planned psychological torture. But those laundries closed in 96. And when I was growing up, I would see elderly women on the streets. And what they used to do, they'd just beg for money for scratch cards or collect little cigarettes and smoke them. And there was a lot of them. And these were women who had been institutionalized by the laundries and now they're elderly. And when the laundries closed, they got some of these women and they gave them little chalets, little houses, because they were institutionalized. You know what I mean? And it's not really spoken about in Ireland. Like, I know yesterday they exhumed quite a lot of bones. In a place called Tuam in Galway, they found a mass grave about 10 years ago of several hundred children who were effectively dumped in there. And it's very difficult in Ireland to have any investigation as to what happened because it's not just the church, it was politicians that were complicit in it. So people who are culpable and who might be brought to justice are still alive. So things are being hidden, and they're digging up bones yesterday. But like, yeah, these laundries were bad. Another thing people don't know about is they were capitalist ventures.
In what way?
Private prisons. So the most obvious one is there was a scandal of they were selling babies to America, which there's almost a bit of a you could look at it from a racist undertone. There would have been Irish American couples who had a few quid wanting to buy a little Irish baby, and the Magdalene Laundries were selling the babies to America. Another big thing that people don't know about, and this is fact. Now, I don't know the specific company, but I can tell you the game. Do you remember Mousetrap?
Yes.
Mousetrap and a few other games, and the company who makes them, was outsourced to Irish Magdalene Laundries as free labour, like what's done now in America. So the women were treated as a prison population, and were making games for kids. So games that I might have got as a Christmas present were being manufactured for barely any money in Ireland secretly. You know what I mean? And they had contracts. So it was a capitalist venture. I know we started off talking about dating, but
I mean, I think it's when you think about
that little rod in
Yeah.
between, it's similar to the Magdalene Laundry. You know what I mean?
it's about the, if you do what's natural, which is act on desire, here is an institutional machine that's going to come and get you. Really, it's a sort of threat. I mean, and it's very, because I'm a Blairite baby. Right? I was born in '92. I start school when Tony Blair wins a landslide, and so part of the sexual culture that I was raised in was, on the one hand, and practically you'd be having condoms thrown at you in a school assembly, right? But the flip side of it was because there was this massive moral panic about teenage mums.
Yeah.
And in particular, teenage moms, inner city, girls of colour, that I sort of had this sense that getting pregnant would be the worst thing I could do. And it wouldn't just be a bad thing that I was doing to myself. It would be a real, you've let yourself down, you've let your school down, you've let your family down, all of that. And then you turn 18, you go to university, you move out, you become an adult woman. And the message is, okay, have fun having sex now. It's going to be great. But what you've absorbed is a culture of fear, shame, a sense that if you make the wrong sexual choice, you'll have derailed your life as a woman. And then you've got an element of, particularly around the Me Too stuff, is that what becomes a defining feature of what it means to be a woman is talking about the impact of sexual violence and the conditioning impact of sexual violence. So you're supposed to be hyper aware, hyper responsible, hyper vigilant, and also sexually liberated and having a good time.
Having been raised on quite a lot of shame.
Having been raised on a diet of shame.
Do you see a correlation between the neoliberal Blairite policies, right? Growing up with the worst thing that can happen is to become a teenage mum. But at the same time, they're taking away the social net that would protect the teenage mum. You know what I mean?
One of the first big policy decisions was cutting the benefits that went to single mums.
Okay.
And my mum was a single mum at the time. And so I remember her celebrating the Labour victory, because it's been 18 years of Tory rule that had been the entirety of her adult life thus far. And so I remember how excited and elated she was. And Blair wasn't her politics, she's socialist, all the rest of it. But she was like, this is great. And one of the first policy decisions was this continuation of the John Major Back to Basics campaign.
Okay, yeah.
Taking away the money that she needed to raise us.
Yeah, because that then makes sense in terms of, because we certainly didn't have condoms thrown at us. Condoms, Jesus.
There were glow-in-the-dark ones. I remember those because you'd blow them up and fill them with water.
So you had the glow in the dark.
Yeah,
I once got kicked out of a cinema for chewing flavoured condoms. No, I was about 16. But like, yeah, I just remember the vending machines of flavoured condoms.
Yeah.
So there was one in the cinema, and I was just like, I wonder what that tastes like. And I started chewing it at the back of the cinema, and the security guard just kicked me out because it was so strange. Which I suppose it is a bit strange, you know. But like,
But it's also like, it's flavoured.
it's flavoured, but as well, see, condoms in Ireland was a weird thing. I think it's up until the late 90s they could only be purchased in a chemist. And it's an interesting thing now. Now you can get condoms anywhere, right? But they were reluctantly put into the chemist in the late 80s, I believe, because even for men or women to go and buy them, the chemist became a little priest. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? And then suddenly, the first person, Richard Branson, Virgin Megastores, and this would have been maybe 95. There was a Virgin Megastores in Dublin, and Richard Branson made the mad decision to go, you can buy condoms beside your CDs. And that was a real revolution in Ireland. Today, though, if you speak to women in Ireland who are getting the morning after pill, that's still gatekept by the pharmacist.
Yeah.
So there's a comedian in Ireland, Justine Stafford, and she did a brilliant sketch about it. But for a woman in Ireland to get a morning after pill, it's a shame-based interrogation that comes from, you know what I mean? So it's discouraged in a way. It doesn't feel like a free choice. We got at this because we were talking about dating apps, right? So we're speaking about very human ways that people partner up with each other, but how various institutions have got into the way. Like, now the religion isn't there. Who's there? See, the thing is, when a nun steps up with a broom, I at least know she's not on my side. Like, I know she's trying to stop something. But we don't know this with dating apps. Do you know what I mean? The dating app is, let's turn sexual selection into a one-armed bandit. You know what I mean? Let's incentivize subscription fees so you have better selections or super messages or something like that. Or
Well, I've got a theory as
How
well.
does that work?
So it's been a very long time since I was on the apps, and I think they've changed a lot. And I wasn't on them for very long because I felt that everyone else had got this rule book that I didn't get. And I remember once the only thing I knew about this guy is he said, oh, I like art. And I was like, oh, what kind of art do you like? And he was like, why are you asking me that? And I was like, 'cause I don't fucking know anything else about you. And then I felt like an idiot. But a friend of mine who's on the apps says that part of how it works is that you get the best matches, i.e. ones which have been sort of ranked as highly desirable.
Based on the algorithm.
They're hidden behind the subscription. So if you get the free one only, you're going to get shit matches. Then the other thing that happens is that you get sort of categorized based on attractiveness. So if you're a sort of, top percentile woman, you'll see a lot of top percentile men. But if for whatever reason you've been ranked as being, say a paltry 60th percentile woman, you'll see men who are less desirable to you, less desirable in general. And then when you're about to lose hope, you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. You get thrown in a sort of super desirable guy to sort of keep you.
Oh my God, like a rare Pokemon.
Like a rare Pokemon. So you're like, oh, shiny Charizard. And then it's Diglett, 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 Diglett.
Wow. Because one thing too that I think about so it's a billionaire-controlled platform. I'd be very concerned about data, because the one thing is, a dating app is going to ask you questions that no other app is going to need to know. You know what I mean? And what it's getting there is quite an intimate psychometric profile of an individual. And then the dating app holds that in its data. And it's like...
But are people honest with the app? Have you ever had a friend show you their dating profile?
No.
I had a friend show me their dating profile, and it was so not real. It wasn't that any of the things were lies. It was just curated in such a way to project the kind of image of a woman that would attract the kind of man she would want.
So... what I'd love to know is that person aware that they're telling fibs, or is this just how they think that they are seen? It gives there's a lovely theory in psychology. It's called the real and the ideal self. It comes from a psychologist called Carl Rogers, who was a humanistic psychologist. And Rogers has this idea that as humans, we have our real self and our ideal self. The real self is it's the person maybe that the person who loves, the person who's capable of compassion, the person who is calm and relaxed, the person who you are when you're at play, when you're having fun. The ideal self is the messages that we pick up from society, the messages that we pick up from parents, from teachers. The ideal self is how we would like to be seen by other people, right? And Rogers' theory is that if your real self, we all have a little bit of both. If your real self and your ideal self are too far apart, they're incongruent, in the middle is the potential for mental health difficulties. Do you get me? So the goal to be an effective human being is to try and find your real self, who you really are. And that's a tough journey because...
Do you think you've been able to do it?
I can't say it's a journey, and I don't think anyone can ever say they're there. It's something I strive to do. I daily, I'll try and remind myself, like a little mantra is, I'm better than nobody else. Nobody else is better than me because I'm a human being and I have an intrinsic worth. And all human beings have the exact same worth just because we're human. And no aspect of our behaviour, even if it's bad or good, you can judge the behaviour, but the value of our humanity is the same. It's all equal. So I remind myself of things like that. I mean, this plastic bag is, to be honest, part of that. Now, I've been wearing this plastic bag for nearly 20 years now. One part of it years ago, there's an element of performance with it, but there's also an element of, like, I wouldn't call myself famous, but I'm well known enough for, if I was in a shop, maybe a couple of times a day, people would come up to me and say hello, and it could be either good or bad. And I would consider that to be quite dangerous to my sense of self-esteem. I like Blindboy to be a thing that I wear, and then I take it off, and then I live a normal life. Because something I've found over the years is, if I meet a person with this bag on, at an event backstage, and they already know who Blindboy is, they get a look in their eyes, like a surprised look, like it's a kind of an amazed look, because it's like, oh, I've seen you on screens. You know what I mean? You must get it too. Oh, I've seen you on screens.
Yeah. Yesterday I was going into Finsbury Park Station, and it's always a little bit chaotic outside
you can
Finsbury Park
tell now.
Station. And someone sort of like came out the corner of my eye, and I just, what? Like, it was a real like adrenaline, like threat response. And then I felt terrible for her because she was like, I just screamed in this poor woman's face. And then I felt, as I was walking away and like the sort of adrenaline and cortisol was receding, I felt terrible that I'd given her a bad experience of me. But really, I just had a human thing of being startled when I didn't expect it. But I felt so guilty about it. I felt like I'd been bad at my job.
And this person recognised you.
Yeah.
And because Ash appears on a screen, it's that hyper real thing of, they go, oh my God, like they've caught a rare Pokemon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm sure, like, at this point you've learned, you can walk into a room and you can probably tell, oh, that person has that face where they've seen me on the internet. And they're trying to think, or else they know your name. And that's kind of threatening to our self-esteem. Like, every person I know who's famous or has a good deal of notoriety, the first thing they say to me is, I wish I thought of the plastic bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it can be threatening to my sense of self-esteem if I'm meeting people. If I meet someone without the bag and they don't know who the fuck I am, I have to put in the effort of being a human being, of showing that person I'm a kind, compassionate person, and I'm worth your time to speak to. You know what I mean? That's what you do when you're just a regular person. But as soon as you have some type of notoriety or persona of any degree and it's on a screen, you don't have to do that anymore. And some people who are famous, we'll say, sometimes they turn into pricks.
Yeah.
They turn into pricks because that's what's being mirrored to them all the time. They no longer have to put the effort in of being kind to a stranger or putting effort into conversation because the person already knows them and has an expectation.
But it's also a very fragile sense of self.
And
I mean,
yeah.
one of the things I'm curious about is you've talked a lot about therapy, you've talked a lot about meditation. And when we're talking now, a lot of it is about this a sense of personal responsibility you have to be compassionate and to think about ways in which you present yourself or hold certain things back. And I was wondering what you think about more systemic models of therapy, like systemic family therapy or something, which sort of says, well, look, if it's up to your own devices, you can't really change. We've got to change the social system that you exist in. My mum, for instance, and I think it's also because she's a social worker, the only form of therapy that she thinks is
Systems
real
therapy.
is she thinks
Yeah.
systems therapy. And I wonder where you sit with that, because you've also, had criticisms of individualism and things
Yeah.
which separate the individual out of the system too much.
So I'd agree with your mum there.
She'll love that.
Like I adore things. Like I use what works for me. I find individualistic therapies helpful for me. Now, I'm also autistic, so a huge part of my life is actually spent by myself. So the thing about being autistic is I can struggle with conversations with other people, but my internal dialogue with myself is very rich and enjoyable, and I'm in consistent conversation with myself, and I like it. And that means that I have a good dialogue with my internal self, and I can apply things like cognitive behavioral therapy, transactional analysis, which are individualistic, and I can use these things on myself. But when it comes to like systems therapy is very important, or viewing things in a systematic way. Like there's a psychologist called Maslow. Have you heard of Maslow and Maslow's pyramid?
Yeah, the hierarchy of needs.
The hierarchy of needs. So Maslow had this theory called the hierarchy of needs, and it's at the top you've got self-actualization, but then at the very bottom of this pyramid is food, water. Then it goes up and it's like self-esteem needs, approval from other people. But it is this triangle. But something I learned about that triangle when I really went looking into it, that triangle isn't Maslow's model at all. If you look at Maslow's original research, he was a Canadian psychologist, I believe. He spent time with the Blackfoot Indigenous people in Canada, and he lived with them. And Maslow's pyramid actually comes from living with the Blackfoot people. And what he found with the Blackfoot people was they had a level of self-actualization. Now, self-actualization would be a high level of self-esteem. Now, self-esteem isn't, I think I'm wonderful. Self-esteem is, I like who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm okay saying that I love myself, I deserve love, and it's okay to love other people. And not to be a person who has high self-esteem tends not to be jealous of other people. They tend to understand their own boundaries very well. They tend to be comfortable with conflict because conflict isn't threatening because their self-esteem isn't checked. It's to be actualized is to be an effective, compassionate human being who's open to love, compassion, cooperation. And Maslow found that the Blackfoot people had a level of self-actualization which was around 70%, which is very high. Whereas in Western society, outside of the Blackfoot people, it was somewhere around 4 or 5% of the population were self-actualized. And what Maslow found with these people was they had a value system which wasn't based around owning things. It was based on giving away. So what was revered in the culture was how generous can you be to your community. So Maslow came about with his theory of actualization from the Blackfoot people. But then when his theory started to appear in American textbooks, over the years it got turned into this individualistic pyramid, so that because his theory was challenging to individualistic capitalism. So they had to make it work within capitalism. And now it looks like a fucking pyramid scheme. Now it looks like it's not linear, it's not systems based. It's sort out your food first. Great. Okay, food sorted. Okay, now I need other people's approval. excellent, I'll get that. And when you look at it, you go, oh, that should mean so that Lady Gaga or Bono is actually self-actualized. They've achieved everything. They have material needs. They have the approval of the earth. Oh, they must be at the very top, you know? And I don't think that's true. I think people at the top, some of them are happy, but a lot of them are absolutely miserable.
I was thinking about this because I was listening to your episode about, I suppose, masculinity. And I was thinking about the model of relationships and human connection presented by Andrew Tate. It's based on domination, acquisition, extraction, transaction, low trust, and constant suspicion. And quite rightly, I think, because of the connection of, I suppose, like manosphere and incel discourses to violence against women and also self-harm, we recognise that as a crisis of masculinity. But it occurs to me that there is a mirror of this in content which is targeted at women, which is, if it's a first date, he has to pay for your Uber. The discourse around icks, which are basically, what are all the reasons to dispose of somebody? If you're dating somebody and he's not paying for your hair and your nails, if he's not facilitating your ability to live what's called a soft life, one based on luxury and taking a step away from hustle culture, he's a bum, and it shows that you don't have self-worth. There is this mirror in content which is being presented to women as empowering, except we never ever hear about it. And I was wondering if you'd ever encountered something like that about the model of relationships which is being presented to women at all.
Well, algorithmically, that's certainly not being targeted at me, and that's one thing. What does get targeted at me, now it's improved over the years. There was once a time, about 3 years ago, where if you were simply a man of a certain age using YouTube, you couldn't escape Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson is the gateway drug for a lot of this stuff, I find. And I mean, regarding the manosphere, what we need to start critiquing is, if you take someone like Andrew Tate or even Donald Trump and the way that they behave, the masculinity that's being presented is actually a type of childishness. Now, when I say this, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking shit about children. Like, the thing is, children and adolescents, they throw tantrums. They can be selfish. They're not equipped for critical thinking. They can lash out before thinking about something critical. That's how they're supposed to be. It's perfectly okay for a child to be that way. That's part of their development, their learning, their brain. Same with a teenager. For a teenager to not be comfortable with conflict, or to lash out, or to be selfish, or to be aggressive, like, it's not ideal, but it's also, we've all been there. It's part of the hormones, everything. So when I say this, I don't want to come across like I'm denigrating kids. But when an adult behaves that way, I would call that emotionally immature. And a lot of masculinity, as it's presented to us by the manosphere, they're actually presenting immaturity. I've never, ever received any useful information in the context of gender, ever. If I think of messages that I've received, such as how be a man, act like a man, how would a man deal with this situation? It's never useful. Like, if it comes to conflict, if I have conflict or a disagreement with someone, and I go to the part of me that says, be a man, stand up for yourself, it means walking into the conflict to fight. Conflict doesn't always have to mean fight and aggression. It means walking in there immediately, fighting and winning. I don't even like to, I try and take gender, gender, obviously, it's something that people have to deal with in society because there's structures and rules about gender. But, like, I like to think of myself as an adult. I think what's very useful is for all of us to start identifying as adult, regardless of whatever gender. You think of, I am an adult, and how should an adult be? And an adult is someone who's striving to live in the present moment. When it comes to conflict, an adult isn't concerned about winning. An adult is concerned about listening to the other person's side and seeing, can I put myself into their position? This person's disagreeing with me. There's conflict. Can I put myself into their position and see where they're coming from. And maybe instead of winning, is there an outcome here where both of us are happy? Like, that's an adult way to come to conflict. The manosphere doesn't present that. That's, no, you got to go in and fight. You got to win. And it's UFC adjacent. It's WWE adjacent, because in that context of a fight, you got to win there. There's no compromise between two people in a ring. But that's not real life. So an adult has also a high degree of emotional literacy, understanding our own emotions, in particular anger, because anger is the one that the manosphere pushes anger quite a bit. It pushes anger as an appropriate response. Like when Trump was there in the Oval Office, or not the Oval Office, when he was meeting with Zelensky. You know what I mean? And you're watching that, and it was a perfect model of, that was not emotional maturity.
It was ritualized humiliation.
Yeah.
Like it was bullying.
It was bullying. When JD Vance got stuck in, then like that, I'd say that was triggering for a lot of people, because it reminded us all of being in that situation in school. So Trump was highly reactive. He wasn't listening. He was bullying. He was shouting. JD Vance came in and backed him up. This is then framed as masculinity. This is framed, like, even when Trump and Elon had their spat recently, some of the right-wing manosphere influencers were saying, this is how high-value males have conflict.
Which I thought I saw someone responding to that in with regards to Trump talking about Elon Musk not wearing makeup, which the sort of inherent camp of that, of like, I offered him some makeup, he said no, and then people are like, this is how high-value men navigate conflict.
If they were two women politicians, those right-wing people would say, here you go, here's the evidence, they're too emotional.
Yeah.
Like, straight up, you know, but they've managed to fit it into the context of, no, this is how high-value males have conflict. And, like, it's not at all, because it was about pettiness and winning and revenge and nastiness, you know? And it shouldn't have been on social media in the first place. Like, so I strive to be an adult. I think that a lot of these manosphere people, especially when their content is reaching people under the age of 18, they're not feeding anything useful to a teenager that helps them to become an adult who takes accountability and vulnerability. Vulnerability is a really important word. When the word vulnerability pops up in conversations about men, we tend to only think of it as crying. Is it okay to cry if you're a man? And that's only one tiny aspect of vulnerability. Vulnerability to me is, can I confront the most frightening, terrifying, difficult emotions in myself? The hard work. And the hard work is, jealousy's a big one. Jealousy, low self-esteem. Being able to say, and this isn't just for men, for anyone, sometimes I get jealous of other people. Sometimes I look at what someone else has, or what someone else has achieved, or how they look, or whatever, and that makes me feel small and shit about myself. And usually we don't go to that level of internal reflection, because what pops in first is anger. So you see someone and you feel a bit jealous of them, but what steps in to protect you from that feeling of jealousy is, look at that prick over there, I bet they think they're great.
Or they've done something to me.
Exactly. And that's the type, that's what's being framed as masculinity now, that type of...
But also vulnerability is, you need it when you're really going to love somebody else, because it's not just about them seeing you and, you know, seeing you as an entire person. But also, I think about it a lot with me and my husband. Sometimes we'll be overwhelmed by this fear that something bad's going to happen to the other person. And before they step out the door, you become a bit hysterical sometimes. You'll be like, don't get hit by a bus. And, you know, I'll be like, I wasn't planning on it. And he'll be like, yeah, but just really don't. And it's coming from, oh, I love you so much, and such a huge part of me like lives in you now. And I feel vulnerable. That makes me feel very vulnerable.
So that there is the fear and vulnerability of adult love. Like, that's what that is.
And just nothing in the manosphere or in the ways in which men are sort of taught to gamify dating and romantic connection. In none of it is love.
It's, the thing is, being a big misogynistic prick who objectifies women is a great way to protect yourself from being hurt. Like, it is, like, because the thing is I didn't love her anyway. You know, that's kind of what it is. So it's one of the things, God, in the early days of Jordan Peterson's videos, the early days, when a lot of people would watch them before kind of going, something's up here. One thing that always used to flag with me is this man never speaks about love and compassion and kindness. He's very like he knows his stuff with psychology, and his earliest stuff was about psychology, and it was very interesting. And I remember just thinking, why isn't compassion, love, and love present in any of this conversation? Why is it all conflict based? Like one of the first quotes I heard from him that really made me step back and turn off was he said, young men need to be monsters. Like, what do you mean by that? You know, to put aggression, and it's a strange one because there obviously is a place for aggression, but the place for aggression is usually when there's a legitimate threat, a legitimate actual threat where someone is placed in actual fight or flight.
But how do you then square that with, because I agree with everything you're saying, but I love hip hop, I love rap, and you know, when it was Drake versus Pusha T or Drake versus Kendrick, that for me is Christmas Come Early, because that history of like diss tracks and also knowing that it's not something which just remains within the realm of art, right? Whether it's Biggie and Tupac or like, you know, Fulio or whatever, like there is a violence to it too. So how is it possible to square this aspiration to adulthood and sensitivity and a sense of the other and all of that with also a love for an art form which is so rooted in conflict, competition, dominance, being the best, humiliation of your opponent?
Yes, because effectively what they're doing is playing. So the thing is like two hip hop artists going at it and dissing each other, even though their words might appear to be childish, at the end of the day, they are at play. To create is to be playful. And also to be an adult is to be comfortable being at play. So I'd like to think Kendrick definitely. Drake doesn't strike me as being very emotionally mature, but Kendrick does.
Yeah.
Kendrick seems like a really grounded, solid person. And the thing is too, when I listen to Kendrick's side of it, I don't feel he's taking any of that personally. I think he's at play. He knows that what he's doing is destroying Drake, but it's like these are the rules of the game that they're playing. In the same way that, like, boxers, MMA fighters, not all of them are toxic individuals. Like, there's wrestlers too. Like, I know a fella called Sami Zayn. He was on my podcast. He's a WWE wrestler. He kicks the heads off people every day as his job, and he's one of the nicest, most compassionate people. Heavy metalers, like, it's well known that like people who listen to heavy metal tend to be very nice people. If you go to a heavy metal gig, it's one of the most beautiful examples of controlled, safe aggression, where at a distance this looks like a very toxic, frightening place, and then you get in there and you see, no, this is the theatre of toxicity. This is the theatre of aggression. And hip-hop's like that too. It's the theatre of aggression. We have it in Irish rebel songs, like, Jesus, even if you go old school, and I think of like NWA, Fuck the Police, that to me is an Irish rebel song. Like, we've got Come Out You Black and Tans. Come Out You Black and Tans is Fuck the Police. It's playfulness. Like in
I think Ice-T said it's a lot of shooting, not a lot dead. Like there's
yes. And Ice-T is one of the, if I had a dream guest on my podcast,
it would be Ice-T.
Oh, I've been listening to him since I was a kid. He's the first rapper I ever listened to, and he's just so on the ball. I don't think he gets the respect he deserves as a rapper. Like, he could be credited as the first gangster rapper. Like, his first song was like 86. I mean, his interviews, especially around the time of Cop Killer, because the thing is, he had a song that came out 1991. No, was it before or after Rodney King? Straight after Rodney King, which was 92. And Ice-T, with his heavy metal band, Body Count, came out with this song, Cop Killer. And the song is Cop Killer.
I'm a cop killer and that much I flaunt.
Tonight I get even. And the right wing, and not even the right wing, conservative America went nuts. And one thing that's very interesting about it, and Ice-T says it himself, they said the rap track Cop Killer. In 92, they said this rap song. And Ice-T keeps saying, why are you calling it a rap song? This was my heavy metal band. And Ice-T goes, they called it a rap song because when you say rap, that means black people. You can't say rock because now they're thinking of Aerosmith.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But Cop Killer is an example of, here is a piece of art that even though he's saying, he said the character in this song is angry. And they're angry because they're turning on the news and they're seeing cops killing black people. And this is a song about rage, he says. And he's playing out rage. It's performance, it's theatre. It's music is a strange one with that.
I always think of, do you remember that song Next Hype?
No.
Oh my God,
What's
Next
this?
Hype. You're laughing because you know Next Hype.
By who is it by?
Temps.
No, I don't know
Oh
that
my
one.
God, like it was so silly, and there was like a big moral panic about it.
How long ago was this?
This was early 2000s
Okay.
grime, and the music video is so silly. Like the whole thing is like aggression. It's like, I'm gonna come to your yard, I'm gonna fuck everything up. Clear all your CD rack, that won't get none of your CDs back. Like it's inherently stupid, but there was this big moral panic about it. It's like, oh, celebrating stabbings and da 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 da. And you watch the video and it's just people having the time of their lives. And I think there is something about that language of play and theatrical toxicity, which is just, it's so often missed from understanding the genre.
It's missed understanding the genre, but not only the genre, the medium. If Ice-T wrote a short story about a cop killer, there wouldn't have been that outrage. It's that, it was rap music, but also that it's music. When, like frequently, it's getting harder and harder for musicians to go up on stage and sing a song or to perform without people understanding this is a performance, or when they're on stage, they may be in character. You're
Do you
witnessing
think that about Kneecap?
100%. The thing is with Kneecap, like, it's they're playing characters. When Kneecap are on stage, that stage is a site of performance, and it's a site of play, and it's a site of collage. And like, even when they say kill your local MP, right? It's the context and intent of that art. Nobody in that audience thinks the man on stage just told me to kill my local MP. Kill your local is also, it's a meme format. Like, I know of a song, can't think of the artist, I'm sorry, but it came out about 3 years ago. It's called Kill Your Local Indie Fuckboy. And kill your local it's a meme format. So when Kneecap say kill your local MP, they don't mean that literally. The context and intent in the artistic space is we're collaging some words here. The other thing too with Kneecap and their use of statements, and what makes it so powerful, is protest is becoming really dangerous right now. Protest is becoming scary. Police are showing up with vans that have strange cameras on them, with artificial intelligence software to recognize people's faces. They're trying to ban masks at protests because they want to see people's faces. They're clearly using algorithms, software that we don't know about yet. And how is that data going to be used in 5 or 6 years' time? They're trying to intimidate people. They're trying to find a middle ground. Protest is a cornerstone of democracy. We're allowed to protest. The powers that be, and this is happening in every Western democracy, they're trying to figure out, how can we let people think that they're allowed protest, but make them feel that it's a really bad idea? And that's what's happening. So it's no surprise now that what we're seeing, if you go to a Kneecap gig, you're not just going to a gig and having crack and listening to music, you're after finding a new safe way to protest. And when they do Coachella or they do Glastonbury and all those kids are screaming Free Palestine, they're in a safe space to protest. And that's what Kneecap have done, which is very powerful as an art form to have found that new space through performance. And I think the British government knows this. The big, like Kneecap now are we allowed to talk about that trial?
Yeah, well, I'll supply all your allegedlys.
Okay. So, You can tell. When should I say? Did they allegedly hold up a flag?
Right. So allegedly, so the bit of and this is useful for our audience to know
Yeah.
is that the relevant bit of legislation here is terror legislation.
Yeah.
So it's really broadly defined, and we've got to think about this all the time with our own journalism, because it is a criminal offence to support a prescribed terrorist organization. So Hezbollah, Hamas, whatever. It's also a crime to behave or speak in such a way which is reckless as to whether it could induce others
Yeah.
to support a prescribed terrorist organization. So that, of course, is so broad, right? You could argue, and the state has done this with journalists as well, that forms of coverage which, for instance, refer to Hamas as freedom fighters or resistance, that's reckless as to whether it could induce others to support a prescribed terrorist organization. So the allegations here are regarding, I think it was like Up Hezbollah or something like that, and the showing of a flag.
Yeah.
And the offence would be under the Terrorism Act, as I understand it.
Okay. So what I would anything that Kneecap do on stage, right, is that's within the context of an artistic space. It's within the context of artistic performance. They're playing characters. There's a level of absurdity there. There's a fella behind the two lads called DJ Pro V with a tricolour balaclava, which is a Dadaist, absurd play upon the Provisional IRA. What you're witnessing is a collage of powerful statements that mean things in an artistic space. When that's videoed and then by somebody else and then put on the internet, it's recontextualized by someone else. It's taken out of context. So what's being referred to regarding the Hezbollah flag, first off, they're referring to an out of context video of something that happened within an artistic space. Like the real thing that Kneecap did, that the real bad thing that they did is they went to Coachella and put facts on a screen.
Yeah.
That's the real bad thing that they did. They went to a very mainstream space in America with a mostly white young audience, and they put in text, and the text is the dangerous bit, because now you can take that, you can't even take it out of context. You can meme it in 2 seconds. That becomes a meme that travels very fast. It's not words now in a Belfast accent that's difficult to understand. Very clearly they said there's a genocide happening and this is being enabled by the United States. And that's not a controversial statement. And it's not controversial because, like most, the International Criminal Court would agree with that. You know what I mean? These organizations that are set up to identify what a war crime is or what a genocide is, they're agreeing with that statement. So it's not controversial. That's what Kneecap did that got them in a lot of trouble, because they presented it in a space that really caught people off guard. You can protect the media, but it's like, what's going on? What's this new space that's happening? So I could see there was a scramble to try and catch them out on something. And what I'd argue with around Kneecap is, so first off, they're from West Belfast. And within the culture of the north of Ireland, now I'm from the south of Ireland, so I'm on the outside looking in to an extent, because I had the privilege of growing up in the south where I was safe. But they grew up post-Good Friday Agreement with a lot of trauma in the community, but also the culture of murals. So murals are present in Belfast, in Derry, and it was a way for the community to very clearly say what they wanted to say when there was a hostile British press that wouldn't represent their views. So
Don't give them the oxygen of publicity. That was the Thatcher thing.
Exactly. And changing Gerry Adams's voice and all this type of stuff. So you'd have the Free Derry Wall, very clear statements. And it wasn't just about that community. It became Free Palestine. It became apartheid South Africa. Sometimes they'd have a mural on that wall and it's about the Black Panthers. It's about, this isn't just the struggle here in Ireland, it's the struggle all around the world where there's colonialism or oppression. And Kneecap grew up in that culture, and their art is a reflection of growing up in that culture. And under the Good Friday Agreement, a certain level of that is protected. to speak about your history and culture in the north of Ireland, even when it includes organisations like the IRA, that were prescribed organisations, that has a certain level of protection artistically under the Good Friday Agreement. And I would kind of argue that with Kneecap, you know, because the thing is with Ireland and Palestine, if we didn't just pick Palestine, it's very, very deep on both sides. Like, you can go to West Cork in 1920, and my granddad was actually involved in this. My granddad was in the IRA, and so were my two granduncles, and they were in Tom Barry's Flying Column, it was called. So they're a unit of the IRA, and they ambushed these soldiers that were called auxiliaries. So in Ireland in the 1920s at the time, under British occupation, Winston Churchill created these paramilitary units. They were called police, but they weren't police. So you had one unit was called the Black and Tans, which you know famously from the song "Come Out, You Black and Tans." So there's the Black and Tans, and then you also had the
Cara
Auxies.
Delevingne's granddad, great granddad.
Yeah, Cara Delevingne's yeah, founded the Black and Tans, Hamar Greenwood, and that was on the instruction of Churchill. So Churchill would have gotten Hamar Greenwood to set up the Black and Tans and also to set up the Auxies. Now, the Auxies were different to the Black and Tans. They were the officer class. So they were very posh. They came from money. The Tans, the Tans would have been like Birmingham Peaky Blinders and stuff. Like even, you know, that Bucky's William Hill? Like he was a famous Black and Tan in Macroom in Cork, and he was Birmingham, a little bit of a Peaky Blinder, ended up in the gambling business, and now you've got William Hill. But the Auxies were posh, money, officers from World War One. They were coming to Ireland a bit like mercenaries would today going to Afghanistan. Huge pay. They were getting like £1 a day or something like that back in 1920. And their job that Churchill gave them, they were there as a police force. Their job was to terrorise the civilian population. It wasn't to keep the peace. Their job was, if the IRA do something, then shoot some civilians, burn a few houses, be terrorists, but terrorise the local population. So my granddad was involved in the Kilmichael ambush, where they shot 17 of these Auxies. And this was a huge turning point in Irish history because you have 17 very posh coffins going back to England, you know, and this made an impact. And that then would have been instrumental in leading to the independence of the south of Ireland, the 26 counties. But the leader of those auxiliaries was a fella, balls, I can't think of his, Sir Hugh Tudor. He was Sir Hugh Tudor, so he would have been the leader of all those auxiliaries. When the south of Ireland got independence in 1922, where do you think all those Auxies and Black and Tans went? They went to Palestine. So Britain had mandatory Palestine, and the Zionist project was being set up where Jewish people from Europe were going to what was mandatory Palestine. And the British army was there to protect those early Jewish people that were going there. But they were the Black and Tans. So the people, the soldiers, the actual human beings who had enacted collective punishment and brutalisation on the people of Ireland, their leader and those Black and Tans went and did the exact same thing in Palestine. And that's the 1920s. And from there, you have a solidarity that becomes part of Irish culture. And it goes all the way through where Palestine is within our awareness as this mirror nation where the people who hurt us are now hurting them. So it's there within Irish culture. So when Kneecap express themselves artistically and they bring Palestinian solidarity into their art, that is part of Irish culture, because the Good Friday Agreement protects them about groups like the IRA and stuff. But you can go back to the 70s and there's PLO murals in Belfast. It's all part of the culture, you know?
It's funny because with the Kneecap thing, it's a moment where I also was confronted by the brittleness or even the obsequiousness of English counterculture. And by that I mean, you know, in the 70s, you've got the Sex Pistols, you know, you've got Sid Vicious and Susie Sue, you know, wearing swastikas. And then what happens when, you know, Kneecap are at the centre of this moral panic? John Lydon gets wheeled out to say, well, I think they've gone too far.
It's such a shame.
Because there's something about the way in which, you know, the the British are very proud of punk, very proud of, this sort of, counterculture and, like eat my shorts, youth rebellion. But at the same time, that's used to discipline and set the parameters of reasonable rebelliousness to make sure that anything which is too political sits outside of it.
So 70s English punk now has just turned into tourism. Like I would now class it under tourism. Like you do get Americans going to Camden to see the last of the punks. If you walk into one of those, like the tacky souvenir shops that are all over London, you will see imagery that's a little bit God Save the Queen-ish. You know what I mean? They take the language of punk. John Lydon, I'm really disappointed in John Lydon because both his parents are from Thurles in Ireland. I would actually contextualise God Save the Queen as an Irish rebel song because it is an Irish rebel song. It's just sung in an English accent in the same way that Elvis Costello, like his real name, he's Declan McManus. He's pure Irish. Sure, do you know Dusty Springfield?
This is now starting to turn into, the sketch from Goodness Gracious Me where he says everything's Indian. And he's like Henry VIII, Shakespeare.
I'm serious. Do you know what Dusty Springfield's name is?
No.
Mary Bernadette Isabel Catherine O'Brien. That's son of a preacher man, Dusty. Yeah, we're all over the place. John Lydon, Johnny Marr is John Maher. Morrissey is Stephen Patrick Morrissey. But like Elvis Costello, Declan McManus, he's got a song called Oliver's Army. Like Oliver's Army, if you listen to the lyrics of it, it's all about, it's anti-colonial. It's Oliver is Oliver Cromwell. And it's the story of how money and British power did this to Ireland. And then let's look at what else it does in the rest of the of the empire. Similarly with the controversial song, Come Out You Black and Tans, that went very viral. There's Come Out You Black and Tans and that's the one. Come Out You Black and Tans. That tells the entire story of colonialism.
Oh, 100%.
It talks about, tell him how you slew those old Arabs 2 by 2 and the Zulus. That is a beautiful example of an Irish oral tradition of how you hold your history in song. And it's solidarity. And it's not this Irish rebel song. This is the dangers of empire and colonialism, and there's solidarity with everybody. And Kneecap are carrying on that tradition. When it comes to the Irish rebel tradition, it's about everyone who's colonised. It's not just about us. Bernadette Devlin McCalliskey, she was given the key to New York in 1973, I believe it was, because she was one of the original marchers at Bloody Sunday, and she was there and she witnessed 26 people being shot by British soldiers. And then the Irish Americans, because Irish America had this fond old country thing, and Irish Americans from a safe distance, a lot of them liked to be up the rah, and they'd give money towards the cause and all of this. And Bernadette went over to see the Irish Americans in 1973, and when she got there, she met all the Irish Americans who had a few quid, who had a bit of money, and she realised, Jesus, you're pretty racist over here. I know you support me back home, but the way that you're speaking about black and brown people is horrendous. So when the mayor of New York gave Bernadette the key to New York City, she took it and she went up to Harlem and gave it to the Black Panthers. And that's Bernadette going, I don't care that you're Irish American. This isn't about this. This is about colonisation, and this is about oppression and systems of oppression and anti-capitalist. And Kneecap are carrying that tradition. That's what they're doing. And I like, here's the thing too, and this is, they're being accused of holding up a flag of a prescribed organisation. Go into a loyalist area in Belfast or Derry now, and you're going to see flags of prescribed organisations hanging on flagpoles and no one's taking them down. It's happening right now. You know what I mean? So to me, I'm not going to say it's a show trial. I don't think that the people who are bringing the trial feel that they're going to win. I don't think it matters. It's about intimidating. Here's the thing. It sends the message to all the other artists. If you are pro-Palestine, this is really dangerous. Not only are you going to lose sponsorships, not only are you going to lose business, you might end up getting called a terrorist. And the thing is too, with the two lads in Kneecap, they're going to have great difficulty entering America for the rest of their lives, regardless of what happens with this trial. You do not even America, most Western countries, you can't just rock up and say, because you know the way you do the immigration form, you go anywhere and you click and one of them is terrorism offences. So that means anytime they go to holiday for the rest of their life, they have to click that box and they're now in a special queue and a special room. And that's terrible, you know, for art.
I've got one last question for you, and I realise it's quite a big one because we're speaking after the third night of rioting, racially motivated attacks on foreigners in Ballymena in the north. Last summer, there were anti-immigration demonstrations, significant unrest in Belfast. And a few years ago, there was also anti-immigration rioting in Dublin and in the south. What's going on there? How is it that anti-immigration sentiment, and I realise that Ireland has traditionally been fairly racially homogenous, but like, you know, you man are the immigrant factory. Like, you sent a lot out there. So how does anti-immigration sentiment take root in a culture which owes so much to its diaspora, and the fact that its diaspora transformed other countries, made other countries?
So, like, if you put a gun to my head and say, why is this happening? The first thing I'd say is neoliberalism, right? So since in the past 20 years, and this isn't just Ireland, this is a lot of countries, an economic system has come about where we'd say housing is fully financialized. So housing is no longer about giving people a home. It's become a commodity where you can earn a lot of money. We have in Ireland huge amounts of investment funds and also what we call vulture funds that are coming in and buying up all the houses before people can get them. We have a government, and this is because of government policy, by the way. We have a government who don't want to build social housing. What they want to do is, like, it's hard to describe what neoliberalism is. Neoliberalism is a way for very wealthy people to steal public money. That's how I see it. You had these things before called public services, where someone pays tax, and then the tax that's being paid funds a public service, okay? And that was very clear. With neoliberalism, now you've got a rich person comes in the middle and says, I've set up a toll booth here, you know? So the way that, like, housing would work in Ireland, for people who want to access public housing, it's no longer built by local councils. To get an affordable house, you have a family, we'll say, who are getting an affordable house. And they are accessing a house and they're spending a small amount of money. It's affordable. But that house belongs to a landlord. And the landlord is charging market value to the government. So these people might be spending a couple of £100, but then the taxpayer is spending maybe 1,500 quid. And now for some reason that private landlord in the middle is siphoning off public tax money. And this isn't just happening with housing, it's most public services. So what that does is that's the easiest way I can describe neoliberalism, and it's not just Ireland. That creates a feeling of confusion and unfairness, right? It's a sense that you look around and you go, this economy appears to be doing we appear to be in quite good.
Line goes up.
Yeah, like, I mean, people are in shops, people are purchasing things. There's certainly not a recession. Why are people in tents? You know, why are there what you refer to as shanty towns up and down Ireland? Why is this happening? And that's very confusing. It creates a feeling of hopelessness, and it creates a feeling that politics don't work anymore, that your vote means nothing, because no matter who's in power, they're still allowing private interests to have more rights than just regular people. And within that sense of confusion and hopelessness, it's very easy to come in with simple narratives. The simple narrative of, actually, it's them immigrants. And this isn't like this story is very, very old. Actually, it's those immigrants. So that's what's happening in Ireland. Government policy, neoliberalism, has created a huge wealth inequality where access to housing is very, very difficult for the vast majority of people. And within that frustration, you also have immigrants coming here. And it's people are blaming them, but it's also being stoked from the outside. And we're trying to figure out. So I can't tell you the exact figure, but journalists in Ireland looked at this. About, I think it's close to 70% of online traffic regarding this new anti-immigration kind of far-right narrative, about 70% comes from outside of Ireland. Huge amount from America, a lot of it from Britain. I often wonder about, like, why does Tommy Robinson care about this? Why does Tommy Robinson care about what's going on in Dublin? You know what I mean? Quite a lot of British far-right groups who 15 years ago would call me a paddy, they now all of a sudden consider the Irish people to be their brethren and are very interested in the great replacement that's happening in Ireland. Similarly, unionist groups in the north of Ireland who are attached to groups that literally would have kidnapped and massacred Catholics in the 70s, they all of a sudden now are friends of Catholics in the south. And to me, it looks like, I think, I'm putting on my conspiracy hat now, right? Because I can't prove this, but I think wealthy interests in Britain do not want a united Ireland. They really don't want a united Ireland in the same way that they didn't want Scottish independence. Under the Good Friday Agreement, it states that one day Ireland can have a referendum and that a united Ireland may be achieved through democratic means, through a vote. A great way to stop that from happening is to create a sense of division within all that. And who's being targeted are Irish nationalists. And then the Irish nationalists, like you asked me the question, how do Irish people who have immigrated all over not only have we immigrated, you can look at our history and you can see the way that Irish people were spoken about in England and spoken about in America. We were considered to be, like in the 1850s, after the famine. When
they literally thought you were a degenerated race.
Yeah.
That you had sort of like undergone a backwards evolution.
Yeah. Like they used to whip out eugenics and they would have a African person, Irish person, and an Anglo-Teutonic. And they would bring in race science to say that we are not human. They'd say they're a little bit more human than people from Africa, but they're not fully human, not like English white people or Germanic people. And they'd have all this. They'd have cartoons that would say Irish people is the immigrant that can't mix. They would say that we would bring disease, pestilence. Every single stereotype that's now being used against immigrants in Ireland was used against our great-grandparents. And the one thing you can get from a terrible history like that is an opportunity to use empathy. And emotion is more powerful than facts. So I know lads that are repeating far right talking points, and they went to Australia during the last recession. And I know lads, literally, it's like, I went off to Australia to work, and I came back in 2016, and the place was full of immigrants. And they're saying this with a straight face because emotion in that case is stronger than facts. And they're also, like the Irish flag isn't about dominance. Green means the Catholic nationalist community, orange means the unionist Protestant community, and white means the potential for peace and unity between the two. It's a very peaceful flag of a republic. And they're taking this as if it's a nationalistic flag. Like the Union Jack. The Union Jack is a flag of conquest. It's a flag of, I am better than you and I'm going to take your shit. You know what I mean? Like, they're looking at Irish rebel songs, and if you have a rebel song, that's about the Black and Tans, we'll say, which is about a group of paramilitaries who were called the Black and Tans because there wasn't enough fabric for uniforms during World War I. So these soldiers would often have a black top and a tan bottom. So that's why they were called the Black and Tans. Now they're telling these stories or singing the songs to recontextualize them, to be actually about people with black skin and tan skin. You know what I mean? Even though it's completely out of context. They're looking at people like James Connolly, who was a socialist, and saying if Connolly was around today, he wouldn't stand for this immigration. They're referring to immigrants as foreign invaders, and they're taking our own history. The British Empire did try to take our language, take our culture, to take rights away from us. The penal laws, it's a long history. It happened, and it was terrible. And now there's some people trying to recontextualize that and go, a bit like what's happening today when someone from Bangladesh moves here. And all I can say is emotion is more powerful than facts sometimes with these people. And sometimes, well, not these people, all of us sometimes, if we don't use an adult level of criticality, we'll find a way for facts to fit our emotions. And that's what's happening. And two, something that I think it's important is there are people who are far right and are straight up fascist, and they identify with it and they're proud with it. But also, I'm cautious about calling most people far right, because when you do that, you further entrench that person into the ideology.
Or you give them an identity for it. You give them an identity for their feelings.
What I prefer to say, when it's someone going, my brother has just started talking some shit recently. When someone says that, my brother or my sister or my mother, who usually is not interested in this stuff, now all of a sudden is speaking some things that I hear fascists say. A good way to approach that is to say, I notice you're repeating some far right talking points. And I think that's a more effective way to approach the situation than going, you're far right.
Yeah.
Because it never works. And it entrenches people, you know what I mean?
I think that's a very good place to wrap up, Blindboy.
Okay.
Thank
Did I go
you.
too far? Did it go too long?
No,
Oh,
not at
grand,
all.
okay.
I mean, look, I love a really long interview.
So do I.
So great.
All
We're
right,
both
God
happy.
bless. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Is that all
So
good?
good.
That was brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much.